The house had been empty for years, but when the old woman passed away, her family decided to sell it. They advertised it as a fixer-upper, a cheap piece of property with great potential. The neighborhood was quiet, and the few remaining houses around it looked even older, shrouded in shadows by towering, dying trees. When Shiza and Mark decided to buy it, they thought the place could be a bargain. Neither of them believed in the supernatural, and the house seemed like it was just in need of a little love. They moved in on a dreary Saturday in early autumn. The day was overcast, with the clouds hanging low, thick and heavy, as if they, too, had seen too many years of neglect. The house, though, stood firm, as though it had been waiting for them. The creaky wooden floors and musty smell in the air reminded them of old, forgotten memories, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with a bit of paint and new furniture. That night, Shiza awoke to the sound of footsteps. It was faint at first, like someone walking slowly on the floor above them. She looked over at Mark, still asleep beside her. She could see nothing out of the ordinary. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, but the footsteps grew louder, more distinct. Shiza was unsure whether it was the house settling or something else entirely. She told herself it was the wind and tried to fall back asleep, but the noise didn't stop. The next morning, Mark was already up, sipping his coffee and flipping through his phone. Shiza tried to shake off the lingering unease of last night's noise. She hadn't mentioned it to him yet. She didn't want to sound paranoid. Later that week, things started to feel off. Objects would be out of place, though neither of them could remember moving them. The curtains in the living room would sway even when the windows were closed. And that noise, the footsteps, continued. Sometimes they would come in the middle of the day, echoing down the hallways. Mark began to hear them too, and eventually, they couldn't ignore the fact that they were both waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone pacing above them. One evening, as Shiza was putting away dishes, she caught something in the corner of her eye, a figure standing at the top of the stairs. It was fleeting, but she swore it was there, a thin shadow of a woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown. Her heart raced. She ran to tell Mark, but by the time they checked the stairs, the figure was gone. Shiza couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Sometimes, she'd walk through a room and catch the faintest whiff of lavender, but when she searched, there was nothing to explain the scent. It was as if something, or someone, was lingering, watching their every move. The feeling grew stronger over time, until even Mark began to have restless nights, his sleep disrupted by the unsettling presence in the house. The final straw came one stormy evening when Mark, in a fit of frustration, shouted at whatever was haunting them, "Enough! If you're here, show yourself." The temperature in the room dropped immediately, and Shiza watched in shock as the lights flickered and dimmed. A gust of cold wind blew through the cracks in the windows, despite them being shut tight. The footsteps started again, but now they were much louder, more aggressive. It was as if the thing was no longer trying to be subtle. Mark reached for the door to the attic, the only place they hadn't explored. The handle twisted easily in his grip, and the door creaked open to reveal an old wooden staircase, dark and narrow. Something in the attic had been causing the noise, something old, something angry. But as they ascended the stairs, they both froze at the top. The attic was empty. There was no furniture, nothing that could explain the footsteps. But the air was thick, oppressive, as though the house was holding its breath. As they turned to leave, Shiza caught a glimpse of a figure in the corner of the room. It was the same woman, pale and gaunt, standing silently, staring at them with hollow eyes. The last thing Shiza heard before the house fell into eerie silence was Mark's voice, trembling, whispering, "We need to leave. Now."